We picked up this Nissan twin turbo 300ZX for Tech Garage. The car has absolutely no problems. The truck, not so much. We got some massive brake fade when we were towing. So we're gonna go through the complete brake system from the front to the rear with a fine-tooth comb, and we're gonna upgrade the brakes today on Tech Garage. Welcome to Tech Garage presented by Advance Auto Parts. Today it's about upgrading the brake system, the hows and whys to the entire brake system. You know, a lot of us tow with our vehicles. We may be towing a trailer, and not only do we have to stop the vehicle, we also have to stop the forward momentum of the trailer behind it, and then introduces a lot of heat into the brake systems.
And if you're guilty, like many of us are, of adding more power and spending your time trying to figure out how to make your vehicle go faster, well, we've got to balance all that thought, budget, engineering with how do we stop the vehicle? It's a common question. How do I make it go faster? But maybe what we should all be asking is, how does it stop?
That's true. And the power, I got a good analogy for us. If this truck here is driving about 200 horsepower, think about this for a minute. It may go from 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. This brake system has to stop that truck in 1/5 the time. Brian, that's comparable to a 1,000 horsepower brake system.
Now that's some power. Now what we're going to talk about today, we're going to spend our time certainly on doing a thorough brake job. But the reality is many of you have done this job a million times, maybe more. We're not going to just teach you and follow proper procedures. We're going to spend our time emphasizing professional procedures so you understand how the whole system works, exactly what you're doing, and we'll end up doing this project on our Silverado just like the pros do it.
And you know, Brian, we even have a garage guru with us from Federal Mogul Motor Parts, and he's going to help share some professional tips along the way, but we need to start with the basics first. So let's head over to the trainer. Now, we always like to start with the basics, and two important things is understanding the components, what they are, and just as importantly, a good visual inspection. We'll start out right here with a brake trainer where we have them all laid out. You can have a drum brake system. Now our drum brake system right here, this employs the shoes, and then you have a drum that spins around, or you could have a disc brake system. Now my disc brake system over here actually has a rotor, a caliper, pads, and a housing. You could have four-wheel discs. If you have an older car, you may have four-wheel drums. Either or, you're going to have to deal with both those systems. Coming up here is the actual heart of our system. That's the master cylinder. And prior to that is our brake booster. Now our brake booster helps in driver assist. When I push it, some vacuum apply is going to help apply this master cylinder. There's pistons inside of here that are going to transfer hydraulic fluid into mechanical energy down at the brake system, which is going to apply the pads and squeeze the rotor. Now I can show it to you in operation. So really what's going on, brake system's job is to convert kinetic energy, which is the motion of the brakes, into heat energy. And we said earlier that heat is going to be our big enemy, and the professionalism that we're going to put into this brake job is going to help us avoid a lot of that. Now if I come over and I just hit the brake pedal, when I hit the brake pedal I'm transferring the fluid down, and when I transfer the fluid down you can actually see it start to lock up here on the disc. It's transferring it down. The kinetic energy of the rotor spinning around is then transferred to heat energy, and we have to dissipate that into the outside atmosphere. And now that you understand the basics, let's put this into practice, because a good visual inspection is the next step, and Brian's doing one right now.
With the wheel off, a professional inspection of all the brake components, in fact suspension components, is your opportunity to make sure you understand everything happening in here. Now we're primarily looking at brakes, but this is the time you want to look at the strut assembly. Everything looks tight. Sway bar assembly, disconnects, bushings, all of that looks pretty good. Now on to the brakes. Let's start with where the hard brake line marries up to the soft brake line. At this coupling, I want to look at the connector. It looks solid, it looks tight. There's no obvious leakage, drippage, no evidence there of any types of problems. In fact, the rubber, the soft brake line, looks to be in really good shape. It's pliable, it's supple, it can move with the suspension. It's not brittle and there's no cracks. I feel pretty good about that. When you move over to the soft brake line where it comes back into a hard coupling into the caliper, you also want to look for any leakage. Nothing there, it looks pretty good. It's obviously very tight. I think that's okay. One problematic area here on the caliper is the bleeder valve. Lots of times they'll shed the little rubber boot, protection boot. Ultimately, we're going to replace this caliper, so it's not a big deal, but if you were using the same caliper, you definitely want to button that up at the end of your project. Then you want to move out to the rotor. On the rotor face, You want to look for burnishing marks, any kind of tracks or heat evidence, kind of footprints where it's been hot spots on the rotor over time. This actually looks pretty decent. Another problematic area would be if we had a ridge out here at the front of the rotor from the pads burning their way down into the rotor over time. This actually isn't too bad, but we're going to go ahead and replace this rotor anyway. And finally, you want to inspect the face of the hat of this rotor. You can see there's a lot of rust and oxidation. In fact, I can feel bumps around here, imperfections. That's going to be problematic when you put the wheel back on and torque the lug nuts down properly. That wheel's not going to sit true against the face of the rotor, and you're going to have lateral runout.
Brian, I found you a bike. You asked for a bike, but you know, man, this one's not going to take you very far.
I'd like to take a ride right about now, but I'll tell you what we're going to use this bike for when we come back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts.
This edition of Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by GRI Engineering and Development, manufacturers of CarQuest Wherever Platinum Professional Brake Pads, AP Laser, leading the way, Steel Rubber, quality crafted rubber parts and weather stripping, and by Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back to the garage.
Welcome back to Tech Garage. Why do we have an upside-down bicycle on this show? What we actually have here is lateral runout that I want to show you. Now, in its simplest form, this is the same type of braking system that we'll find on the Silverado. We've got a rotor that spins. It's in motion, just like on the Silverado. We've got pads that when you apply braking power, create friction to stop that rotor. What I want you to see is the lateral runout, the wobble in this bicycle wheel. When we spin it, you can see how it's tracking untrue to the face of those pads. They can't apply equal energy to the front and the back of the spinning rotor. Therefore, we don't have maximum stopping power, and that is ultimately what we're looking for. If you had this amount of lateral runout on your vehicle, you would definitely have a problem. Now, for more information on how the professionals do it, John's got a special guest.
Now, to implement some of that professionalism that Brian talked about, we brought in an expert. We have Steve Cartwright here from Federal Mogul Motor Parts. Now, you're a garage guru, and I heard all about the Garage Guru program, and I know they're all about professionalism. Brian talked about lateral runout. Can you shed a little light on it?
Be glad to, John. When we have too much lateral runout in a rotor, it can push back on the piston and then send hydraulic action back up to the pedal that the customer might feel. So most manufacturers have no more than a 2 or 3 thousandths runout specification so that that does not happen.
Now you can do this right out in the garage. We took a dial indicator, put a flexible arm on it, come down, attached it to the rotor. We zeroed it out the lowest point. Go ahead and fire it up.
Whoa.
Now this one's bouncing all around. Yeah, we got about 6 thousandths there. We got about 2 options at this point. We can have it turn or we can just replace the rotor. But important, before we have it turn, we have to understand discard thickness. So come on over here and we'll look at that.
All right, let's do.
Now discard thickness, that's stamped somewhere on the rotor, okay? That's gonna be stamped somewhere up in here. You can read the discard thickness, and then you wanna take a micrometer. And when you take a micrometer, you can go in there and measure it.
You're going to put this right across the face of the rotor and try to find the deepest groove if you have any grooves. So using a micrometer, they have a little clutch in here, so you can't mess up, but you have to know how to read a micrometer. And so they also offer digital calipers now to make the job a lot easier.
That would make it easier. Now the point of that is to have the meat on the rotor so it can dissipate heat. Now Steve, we actually took this off a car, believe it or not. The customer come in, we had a rotor that looks just like this. What do you think about this?
I think somebody got a lot of use out of that bad boy.
No heat dissipation whatsoever, and that's what it's all about. Now, in order for that to happen, we have to have these calipers, and we have a whole array of calipers to show you here. We have a fixed caliper, we have some floating and sliding. It's important. This is a sliding, it moves. The actual floating floats on these pins.
Exactly, John. This pin right here has silicone lubricant on it, and we don't want to use anything but silicone because other chemicals might attack the rubber and cause it to swell. So we don't want to use anything like anti-seize, or I've even heard cases where someone mistook the word silicone for RTV, and you can see all kinds of problems would happen there.
It's like glue.
Exactly.
Now we also have a rear caliper. We'll run into a lot of problems with that. Someone will take it off. It has an integral parking brake. So they run it in with a clamp. Not a good idea.
Right. It's got kind of a corkscrew mechanism inside, requiring a special tool to retract the piston. Otherwise, we could cause damage.
The square cut seal is an important part of the puzzle because it actually pulls the piston back in if we release the brakes.
And it does, and a lot of people don't know why. It's purely for the better gas mileage that we can get from pulling that pad away from that spinning rotor while we're driving down the road.
Steve, I heard about Garage Gurus and I heard about the great things you guys are doing for this industry. Tell us a little bit about it.
I'd love to. We're a support mechanism for professional automotive technicians, and we want to be able to do everything we can do to help them do the job right the first time. So one of the things we've instituted is 12 training centers all over the country, and this year we're going to be adding several more. They're 2-bay shops. They can handle 16 technicians.
Now, what about the actual vans? They can come out to the shops and help some of our commercial shops?
They sure can. We have a fleet of vans that go all over the country. These guys can come in and do lunch and learn sessions, help customers with problems. It's an excellent way for us to go right into their shop.
What about some of our viewers? Now, they're just going to go out to the garage and do some of this work. Do you have any resources for them?
We do. We have two. We have Gurus Online where they can go on and take classes, anywhere from just understanding a system, like an entry-level type class, all the way up to a 30-year veteran.
Wow, we can take that professionalism right out to the garage. You know what, Steve? Thanks for coming. We need to get to work on this brake system.
Well, thank you, John. We appreciate being here.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advanced Auto Parts. This is the final bolt in the brake caliper mounting. Now, I also have the brake caliper mounting bracket free, and this whole assembly is ready to come off. But I'm going to do a lot of prep work over here on the new components before we actually break this all apart. The reason why? The brake line. I don't want to lose too much brake fluid if I can help it, and I've got a proper, appropriate way to capture that so we can dispose of it after we're done. So when I come over to the bench, we've got a new caliper we're going to install. We've got the slide pins in. They're pre-lubed. We've got a new caliper mounting bracket. And we've got these tremendous Wherever Platinum pads that have a burnishing strip. They have a lot of engineering in the back of the pad in the shim as well. So they're going to be quiet, but they're going to perform really well on this truck. We tow with it. We haul stuff with it. We need this thing to stop. And this is the right combo package to get us there in terms of a brake upgrade. Also in the Wherever box comes lubricant. We want to put this lubricant on the spring clips right in here so that the pads can slide around and move back and forth and actually rebound properly during the braking action. So that's ready. I'm going to go ahead and break open the brake line. I'm going to go ahead and bust open the brake line and back it out. Now, resist the temptation to pinch this line with a clamp. I'll be honest, I might have done that a time or two, but that's not a professional procedure. Back this clamp out, and we're beginning to drip a little bit of brake fluid, so I'll let that hang, adjust the bucket, make sure we're capturing it, and we're good. I've got everything loose here, the caliper mounting bracket off, and now I'm ready to remove the rotor. One mounting screw on that rotor, couple turns, back this rotor securing screw right out. Go ahead and pull this rotor off. Good. Put on our new high-performing frontline rotor, which is definitely going to enhance stopping power. Line up the screw, put it back in. And this is actually really helpful in this moment because as we set this rotor in place, it's going to be true and square so that our caliper mounting bracket is going to go on and be a little more friendly in the process. Okay, so the rotor's secure. Again, honor the spec if you've got one for this. Now, the next step is the caliper mounting bracket. It's going to go right in place, but you want to be sure you use Loctite on these mounting bolts. It's a little step, means a lot. You hear me say that all the time. It's attention to detail to make this job the same way the pros do it. I'll add a little Loctite. I'm going to go ahead and hit the bottom mounting hole first. Set the bracket in place. Now the top bolt. A little bit of Loctite. And get these tight. Again, probably a torque spec here that you need to honor. All right, next we're going to set the pads in place. Back pad. These platinum pads go in so nicely and fit so well. Now, with the caliper pistons completely compressed, this caliper is going to sit right down over just like it's designed to. Proper procedures, the way professionals do, that really ultimately make a big difference. Okay, brake caliper is secure. We'll come back and torque that. Let's go ahead and get the brake line back in place. You got to use the new seals. Critically important so you don't have any leaks right here. Reconnect the brake line. There's the outer seal, the inner seal. They both came with the Wherever Platinum kit. Going to gently work it back in place. All right, good and secure. Final step, a little brake clean, because I got a lot of brake fluid residual around here. We don't want to have any of that hanging around. Spray that on, wipe it off. Now we have no chemical interference with the friction on the pads as they come to life on our new high-performing brake assembly. Stay with us, a lot more to come when we come back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts.
This edition of Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by Dustless Blasting. It's the future of surface preparation. Latch and Load. No more load in the road. GRI Engineering and Development. Manufacturers of CarQuest Wherever Platinum Professional Brake Pads. And by Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back to the garage.
Welcome back to Tech Garage. Now, anytime you do any brake work, you at least want to take your rears off and give it a good visual inspection. We just took our drum off. We're just looking at any kind of signs for leakage. Our wheel cylinders, our axle grease could be leaking. Checking our springs for any stretching or burnish. You can get a spring kit and replace that. We're also looking at our shoe depth to make sure our shoes are in good shape and not cracked. Once we do that, we can just come over. I like to lube the bosses down here so the brakes come out nice and easy. Then what I'll do is I'll take some brake clean and I'll go in there and I'll clean up all the area along with the drum. Then you can put your drum back on. You can use a screwdriver. You can adjust this adapter right here, little adjuster, bring them up. You remember Brian took the caliper off earlier. We need to go bleed this system. Now Brian only opened the fronts, but if you do any work on the brake system in the rears or the fronts, you're going to have to bleed it. What bleeding is, it's simply just removing the air. Air's compressible and liquid's not. So when you pump the pedal and you have air in the system, you're going to get a spongy pedal. Now to do it, we're going to look at 4 different methods. The first one's manual bleeding. You've probably done this before in the driveway. Maybe we can share a few tips for you. But to do manual bleeding, you're going to have a buddy. And we got Brian up in the cab of the truck, and we're going to work together with a line of communication. So what I'm going to ask him to do is pump the pedal. He's going to pump it. The hydraulic fluid is going to pressurize all the way down to the bleed screw here, and then I'm going to open it. We're going to shoot the air out first, and then liquid will follow. So Brian, go ahead and pump the pedal a couple times.
Pumping, and you really only need to pump this 3 to 5 times. Holding.
Holding. I got to hear that he's holding it because we don't want him to release the pedal. Also, I have a catch bottle here, submersed in fluid. In case he does lift his foot up, I'll suck up fluid instead of air. So I open this up now, and you can see the fluid bubble in there. Boy, those air bubbles are happening. We'll do that about 5, 6, 7 times so the air is all removed. Now another method you could use is gravity bleeding. That's simple. Just come on over, open up the bleeder, and you can see it spray and then start to drip. Just gravity, but be careful with that because some lines go above the master cylinder. And if they go above the master cylinder, gravity won't work. Now sometimes professional shops, or you can go get this tool yourself, they use what's called a vacuum bleeder. Now a vacuum bleeder hooks up to an air source. Plug that in right here. And what happens, it creates air pressure in here. It creates a vacuum. So right now I have a vacuum going on here. I put it on the bleeder, I open it up, and I actually pull the brake fluid from the master cylinder all the way through. Non-intrusive, great tool. Doesn't do any damage to the system. One other method is actually pressure bleeding. That's where you put an apparatus on top of the master cylinder, you push the fluid from the top to the bottom, but it's critical that you get the air out of the system. If you open the whole system, start with your right rear, go to your left rear, then your right front, and then your left front. Always work back to the closest to the master cylinder. We got the air out. We'll get this thing buttoned up. It's time for the email question of the week.
John, Nikki from Dayton, Ohio wrote in this week. She's got an '04 Mustang that she had a spongy brake pedal on. She knew enough to bleed the brakes to try to get the air out of the system, but not too long after that, the spongy pedal came back. What's going on with Nikki's Mustang?
Well, Nikki, brake fluid doesn't last forever. There's a term called hygroscopic, and what that means, it absorbs water, and brake fluid does just that. If you leave your cap off or over time, 100,000 miles, it's time to freshen up the brake fluid. You know, we got a really cool demo here because I took some brake fluid out of that pickup truck, which has 100,000 miles, and we left the cap off all day while we were working on it. So it absorbed some water, and we put some .4 in here. So get your goggles on. Let's fire this up and see if this thing will boil.
All right.
Now, there's different types of brake fluids.
Yeah, we got .3, 4, and 5, and we get a lot of questions around that for which applications. I can tell you this, whatever your vehicle calls for, has been engineered and designed for, is exactly what you should use.
Yeah, and it's just a higher boiling point. It's .3, .4, and .5, but very important. .3 and .4 are glycol-based fluids. .5 is silicone-based fluid. So you want to put 5 in those special applications. But 3 and 4 are interchangeable. If your car calls for 4, you have to use 4. But if your car calls for 3, you can go ahead and raise the boiling point a little bit with 4. Now we had this burn at the same time and at the same rate, and we got our water here burning. That boiling point shot. This one here hasn't even started burning yet.
Now both of these are .4, so this is .4 with moisture in it. This is .4 right out of the bottle, and you can absolutely see if it's boiling like that in the brake lines, John, no way I'm getting full maximum braking potential.
She just keeps getting a spongy pedal over and over again. Go ahead and freshen up the brake fluid. We'll go ahead and shut that off. You know, I sure had a ball working on that truck. Once again, it's wow, those brakes upgrading, whether you're towing or not, that thing's gonna stop on a dime.
You know, or it might be just you're adding a little more power. I don't know, supercharger on the truck? What do you think?
That's a great idea. You might want to join us next week. From our garage to your garage. Thanks for watching Tech Garage.
Production assistance for Tech Garage is provided by Chipola College, located in Marianna, Florida. Founded in 1947, Chipola was recently ranked as one of the top 3 community colleges in the United States.